welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how to make slime effects for your models using the realistic water and some food coloring. You've seen this stuff used when I did the basing video, but again this is going to be something that goes on your model after it's all painted, everything's all said and done, and you just want to add maybe some dripping slime out of a mouth, or you could even use this for blood. You just use the red food coloring and you can just use the same technique. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. First thing we're going to do is pour some of our realistic water into the medicine cup you see in front of you. All the blue stuff that's stuck on there is dried from when I did the basing video, so none of that is still wet. Alright, so we've poured that in there, and then I've just got some generic food coloring that I think it came from Target. And what I'm going to do is use the mixture on the back here that says where it says lime green. It's 3 drops yellow and 1 drop of green. Rather than just using straight green, I'd rather have a little bit different color. And I usually add the food coloring afterwards, just so it doesn't start to kind of like soak in or stain the cup and then not give me as much as it's supposed to in the liquid. So I always drip it on top before I mix it. 1, 2, 3. It looks more orange than yellow when you drop it on there. And 1 green. It doesn't look like much right now. You can see the mixture is just white with the color kind of floating in a glob on top. But once you start to stir it in, the color really starts to come out. And there you go. Now we have the base for our slime project here. So I'm going to cut the camera off and we'll come back and I'll show you how to apply it and how to add some of these effects to your models. Alright, so the slime is all mixed up. We have all our tools and stuff here ready for the next step. If you notice, the slime has a piece of cellophane over the top of it. That's one of the things that I do when I want to keep this stuff a little bit longer, since I mix it in kind of big batches, just to make sure that the color gets mixed through and it doesn't come out way too concentrated in a small amount. And what I'll do is I'll put that in the fridge, and I've had it in the fridge before for up to 30 days and taken it out and it was still good. So maybe if all your models aren't caught up to the same point, you're not quite ready to use it, you can just kind of store it like that for a little bit until you get everything where you need it to be, and then pull it back out, use it. If it's still not done, you can hold on to it until you get another batch caught up. So just something to keep in mind, and again, I forgot to mention that previously. So what we're going to do today is I've got my little test subject here as usual, and we're going to go ahead and add some dripping slime effects to this. And we could easily take a brush with this material here and just slather it on the mouth and it'll look like he has slime everywhere, but what we really want is some dripping effects, and that's really hard to do. Even if you take that and brush it on really thick and it starts dripping, it's just going to drip off with using gravity. With the weight of the liquid is going to actually make it fall off, and then all you're going to be left with is a couple lumps here that are just stuck and look kind of silly. So what we want is slime dripping off of this thing. So we're probably going to put 1 or 2 little lines in here and show you how to make it look like it's actually dripping out of his mouth. Now, because I'm doing this on a head that's not attached to anything, whenever you do this, you want to pay attention to the way that the model stands on its base. So typically the head on this one will be a little bit down and angled, so as you can see that this already has little pre-made drips in it from the plastic that are kind of fake, so we're just going to have some real slime on there. And you want to pay attention to which way that those go, and according to gravity, if your model was actually standing there, because it would look kind of silly as if you're holding the model in your hand and you start drilling this way, and then when the model's standing there, his head is like this, and you've got slime that's pointing out sideways, where again gravity wouldn't be pulling that direction. It would want to pull it down. So when you have your model set, this is one of the things you want to do as a last step after everything's painted and you're all completely done with this, and you just want to add some special effects to it. So your model's standing there on the base and you want to pay attention to where gravity is going to take that slime, so you know exactly where to drill. So again, I'm not going to be having to pay attention to that in this video, but that's something you're going to need to think about when you're doing this on your models. So like I said, I'm going to make 2 little drips of slime, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to use some fishing string, but we have to make a way to attach it, and I typically do that by drilling a hole in here. So this is the fishing line that I'm using. It's 20-pound test, so it's 0.0185 diameter, which is significantly smaller than this small hobby drill bit, but this is the biggest one that I had on hand, so you can always get bigger. I don't know how that's going to affect the way that this looks. This one still works just fine, and as long as you're using super glue to mount it in the hole and you let it dry with plenty of time, you're not going to have any issues, even if it is a lot smaller than the drill bit. So First we have to figure out where we want this slime dripping. I know I want a piece that's going to come off of the tongue here, and I'm probably going to put one just somewhere here coming out of the mouth. So again, making sure we line up with gravity, we figure out where that's going to go, and then I'm just going to go ahead and jump into, again, pretending this model is painted and completely finished and mounted on a base. So I already know which way gravity is going to go, and all I'm going to do is just figure out where I want that slime to drip from, and start a little hole to put my fishing string in, just to give it to something to mount to. I obviously don't want to go all the way through the tongue, which I kind of almost did. Stopped just in time. So we got one hole there, and then we'll just put one under the bottom of the mouth here. Try not to go between the seam there to push the two mouth parts away from each other, because the heads for these come in two halves that you stick together. So as you can see, we've got a hole here and a hole underneath here. I don't think I drilled them at the same angle, so it may look kind of weird when we put the slime on there, but again, just make sure you pay attention to that when you actually do your model for real. This is just a test thing just to show you guys how to do it. So now all I need to do is cut 2 pieces of fishing line. I usually go a little bit bigger than smaller because I can always trim it once I glue it on there. So I'll just cut off a nice big old chunk of it, and then just clip off another big second chunk. So obviously my slime isn't going to drip this far, but I just want something to get it started. It's kind of hard to add fishing line to it than it is to cut it off once you get it glued in there. So then all I do, some plastic in there, just drip some super glue into the hole that we drilled. You don't want to go overboard with this, because remember, your model's going to be painted and you don't want any of those fumes to kind of cover up your paint job. You end up with that white chalky looking mess on your model. So whenever you do this, I recommend finding a way to leave it upside down. And then when I jam this fishing line in here, for these particular purposes, I'm going to leave the head just like this. I'm going to clip it onto a little clamp, and then I want it to stay upside down. So again, those fumes from the super glue, when it dries, if it gets on the fishing line, it's not really going to matter, but you don't want it on your paint job. So all I'm going to do is set this aside for now and let it dry, and then when we come back, we'll go ahead and mess with that and start putting the slime effects on. Alright, so the super glue holding our fishing line in the tongue and the bottom of the mouth here is dry. As you notice, if I turn it over, it has kind of like a curve to it. That's just from it sitting on that little reel for so long. One of the things you may want to do, if it's depending on how long you want your little slime strands to be, you may want to go ahead and just stretch it out, or kind of bend it back the other way first and put it between something and pull it out, just so that it doesn't have that curve. If it's let's say I was planning on making it drip this long, I wouldn't want it curving out that way. So we're just going to end up trimming this. So I got to figure out how far I want it to actually be before we start putting the slime on there, because like I said, you'd rather have it longer than short. So once you get your model set up and you look at it, you go, okay, well, it'll be more realistic that towards the back it's probably going to be a little bit longer. So we'll go ahead and cut it here, and then this one that's on the tongue, we'll make it a little short and cut it like that. So you can see it's kind of a little bit shorter towards the front there, and we'll go ahead and leave it at that. So the curve doesn't really come into play, so that's why I didn't really worry about it. But again, depending on how long you want it, something else you may want to pay attention to when you do this. So all we're going to do for this next part is we need our super glue and we need our slime ready. So I'm going to go ahead and uncover it. I just punched the toothpick straight through the plastic just so I don't waste a whole bunch of toothpicks doing this over and over again. I can just leave it with the same slime color and not really cause any issues. And all we're going to do is I'm going to take my super glue. This is the stuff that I'm using. It's the Loctite, the Control, so it gives you extra time. But basically, once the slime material hits this, it almost sets instantly. So part of this you have to work kind of fast. So all I'm doing at this point is getting my super glue on the fishing line. You just need a nice little thin coat. It doesn't have to be globbed on or dripping. We just want enough that it's going to kind of, when that slime touches it, it's going to activate and do exactly what we want to it, and we don't want any big bubbles. Again, we just want a real thin coat, which is kind of why the extra time is nice to have on there. And then all we do is run our slime all over the mouth. And you want to glob it up so that the weight of it carries it down the end of the fishing line. So I might have to turn it sideways a little bit to do that. And then again, you're going to put some on the accents a little bit. You don't want it just on the dripping areas. So we're going to kind of get it in the mouth and all over these little sacs here, and just kind of a little bit maybe farther down the tongue. And I'll usually kind of knock some of the little blobs off the end there because it makes it look a little silly. And I may need to put a little more super glue on here depending on how fast it dries and sets up on there. You may have to mess with it a little bit and do this a couple times, just kind of maybe build up some layers until you get it to a little bit more realistic look where you want it. Because it looks kind of silly when the bottom has a little bulb on it and the rest of it doesn't have much build up. As you can see, it's kind of clumping up on the end of the toothpick there. So you can tell it kind of sets pretty quick and almost it's like a boogery consistency right before it dries. So you want to make sure you don't get any of those chunks left on there if you don't want them. And that just kind of made its own there, so we'll let that hang. That should be fine. It just won't be as stable as a piece of fishing line. And then again, all we do from here, I try and keep the globs at the tip to a minimum just to make it look a little more realistic. And that's pretty much it. So what we're going to do is we'll let this dry and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. So our final product is dry, and it was just a quick idea again on how you can do this. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it also would apply to blood. If you really wanted any kind of blood or anything dripping off, or some kind of toxic ooze, or again slime on like a mouth of a tyrannid creature. Works really well. As you can see, we have our 3 little drips here. The third one was kind of improvised as it showed up, and I just went ahead and left it. It still kind of looks the same. Has a nice little cinematic effect to it, and again, it would look a lot better on a fully painted model. And then I just have another one that I did as a test as well. So you can see it's got all the slime on the mouth and the tongue, and it's got the nice big long drip going on there. So I would recommend practicing on some little extra heads or models that are off to the side, or even a piece of sprue would work, just so you can get the technique down. You don't want to put too much super glue on there because it will just start to turn the slime will just come out really white and not look very good. So you want to make sure that you practice it again, just like all the other techniques I've showed you, just to get it down. And then once you know how it works for you, or maybe your glue might work a little bit differently than mine, and you have to kind of improvise or maybe do it a little bit quicker, a little bit slower or something. Just again, kind of shows you what you can do with it. So I hope you guys found this video useful. Again, I apologize for the delay in between videos. I'm going to do my best to keep trying to get these out for you guys. If you'd like to see anything in particular, please let me know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video. Thanks.